I confuse love with attention. That's a realization that I've come to. That's been a consistent kind of pattern of dysfunction in my life, which has caused me a lot of pain and suffering as an adult. But then also, as you're saying, it's tied to my childhood and to the kind of dynamics and my perception of where I was receiving unconditional love, and where, whether you receive it or not, it might not be communicated in a consistent way that you need to feel secure. I realized a lot of the personal decisions I was making as a teenager and in my 20s were based on validation, were based on a kind of something that had been lacking in my childhood that I was trying to overcompensate for, in one way or another, you know? I think there's different things that can motivate us, and that's okay. It doesn't always have to be something noble. But
Mm.
the point is that when I got to a certain age, I realized that I was very much trapped in a pattern of living for other people because I wanted to feel deep sense of validation. And I think that has a lot to do with conditioning as a kid,
Yeah.
or since we're children. But
Mm.
yeah, I think dance, when I dance, whether it's intentional or not, um, that's when I often am reminded very viscerally of the kind of pure joy and wonder that children feel, not just when they're dancing, but when they're having all kinds of interactions.
How did these realizations about the lack of when you were a child, these realizations, how were they able to help you as an adult? Like, how were you able to shape yourself better due to these realization that when I was a child I did not get 1 2 3, or I was not attentive to 1 2 3? You reached your
Yeah.
realization, and how did that help? Did you change your
Um,
patterns?
Patterns are very hard to break. I think the more important question and maybe answer, a more interesting answer, is did I start to try, genuinely try? And that trying only came after I was aware, which quite honestly, at the age of 35, was only very recently. It was about the last 4 or 5 years I started to have these realizations. And yeah, there have been major shifts in my life. I don't know. It's all of a sudden like, how personal should I get
Real
with
personal, Ahmed.
with this very accessible and relatable person on the other end of this virtual
Okay.
connection? I real personal. You want people around you who challenge you and who bring out not just the best. We often say the best in you, but I think more important than the best is the truth, a more authentic version of yourself. And in life, especially in your 20s and 30s, as you're trying to establish yourself and you're trying to assert yourself and have autonomy and independence, you can get attached to various things, and those identities can then actually, which are often based on friends, groups of friends, and the people who are around you, they can start to limit you, and kind of dim not just your light in the cheesy way, but kind of dim the thing about you that has maybe been neglected by you because of fear of this or that, or this, your family or your community, or you associated it with another
And
aspect
fear
of
of
your
acceptance,
identity.
maybe.
Yeah, yeah, like the different aspects of our identity that make us fear not just being accepted, but forget even being loved, but being even just appreciated and acknowledged, or even acknowledged. I mean, there's different steps. And yeah, anyway, so I found myself with spending time increasingly as I got older with less and less people. And when I really went through a really rough time in my life about a year ago, I was really telling the people who were there for me when I was incapable of being there for myself. And more than being incapable of being there for myself, it's like the people who really, when I look back at how, in the entirety of the friendship, or even more specifically, in my weak moments when I was annoying and I was like miserable to be around, and I was like very self-absorbed, because when you're sad, when you're in misery, like you just want pity. And especially if I'm a man, when you have a sick man, it's like very different than a sick woman. He said sexistly. But yeah, the point is
Do you truly
yeah,
believe that?
I believe, yeah, I believe that. um what do you mean that?
A sick man and a sick woman.
I think that men are, I think that women have a higher threshold for pain. And I think that men, for a lot of reasons, when they're sick, as a man, tend to worry about themselves more than women do, for sure. That's purely anecdotal, but
Do you
very
think
accurate.
that it's because they're not used to being vulnerable?
I think because inherently and traditionally, men are not used to being vulnerable, are not allowed to be vulnerable. But more importantly, or as importantly, it's that women traditionally are actually expected to be caretakers and have that burden of taking care of children and taking care of the shelter and yeah. So I think they're more accustomed to taking care of themselves and just getting on with it. I like that tangent. But back to your earlier point, what was the original? Sorry, I took you off track.
It's okay. It's okay. This whole convo's gonna get off track, the rails and
Uh-oh.
everything. It's
يا
all good.
لهوي. يا سلام على
أيوة،
فيك.
صلي.
People who are louder aren't always stronger. And sometimes people who are quiet, whether they're inhaling or exhaling or whatever they're speaking softly, sometimes they have a deeper sense of, conviction and self-worth. I am someone who definitely has struggled with self-worth over a very long period of time. But on the flip side, I'm also someone who was felt it was important to be proud about certain aspects of my identity and who I am and my personality as well. So, we're all a little bit of this and a little bit of those, like, if we could heal our inner children. I mean, that's why there's always this, like, stereotype of a therapist who, like, you can go and be like, I'm annoyed at this person at work because they're doing this and that, and you talk for like 20 minutes. They're like, tell me about your father, or tell me when you were younger, what was your earliest childhood memory of happiness? The reason they go there. Look, I've struggled with therapy. You said I think therapy is really important. I'm a very analytical and overly critical thinker, and I'm not saying that like in a proud way. Like, it's actually a problem in the sense that I don't trust easily, especially I do in one aspect of my life, but like intellectually I don't. So I'll always question them, and it's not always constructive conversation with me. Although it's been a few years since I've tried. The reason I say this is because
What kind of healing are you looking for?
healing that is that that gives me things I want and need to be happy, like humility and clarity and self-compassion. Oh, I have hundreds of voices in my head. Sometimes they come out of my mouth, sometimes they don't all, but they're always in my head. And if I had to say, the majority of them, for some reason, are very negative. They're like that negative Nancy in all of our lives that we have, but different, kind of variations. And they tend to repeat themselves often, and they judge you, and they compare you to this person. They compare you to versions of yourself. Oh, these jeans don't fit. Oh, when I was a kid, I used to do all these things that I don't do. So I think on the flip side, there's another voice that is not often talking. It's not very loud. Maybe is caught up kind of just inhaling and exhaling and being chill in your head or in your heart. And that voice is like often quiet, but it's if you can quiet the others, which I struggled with for more than a decade and still struggle with. But once you start to intentionally want to discover the more essential voice, once you have the courage and once you have the kind of uh, the context of your life unfolds in such a way that you often from suffering or some sort of sudden realization, as you said earlier, once you get to that point, and you start to listen to the quiet voice, you find, at least for me, I found that not only is the quiet voice calm and composed, but they're really like convincing. They're very coherent because it's a very simple voice. But no, yeah. So therapy hasn't worked for me super traditionally, but the spiritual stuff I think worked for me because one of my one of my struggles as a child in terms of my sense of belonging was that I often grew up in communities that were religious, whereas I wasn't, and I wasn't necessarily expected to be by my parents as much as other parents were. Um, it was more of a cultural identity for me, and so I lacked sort of faith as a young person. And so for me, it wasn't surprising that like my path towards healing myself and parts of my inner my the trauma of childhood, if you will, which we all experience to relative measures. Part of healing myself was a spiritual path because it helped also to kind of nurture the side of me that was feeling like faithfully lacking, or like, struggling with my faith in life, faith in trusting, things, myself, people, the universe.
would you say you have trust issues?
Yes, I also have daddy issues. I have mommy issues. I have sister issues. I have uh, peer issues. I have issues in how I relate to everything. So yeah,
I mean, this is what Louder is for. We're here
yeah,
to say yes, we do have these issues, and we're on a journey to fixing, not fixing, I mean, bettering
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah.
Not broken, we're just meeting ourselves. There's a lot of times people say,
Oh, I've
uh,
been broken, but yeah, I'm not broken now. But yeah, I've been broken recently.
I'm sorry for that.
It's okay. It's
Was
good
it a
if you don't
heartbreak?
break. If you don't break, yeah, it was prompted by a heartbreak, but I broke my heart like more for myself than for someone else, which was the real heartbreak. I think when you betray yourself, even if that recognition comes through the process of betraying someone you're in love with, which is what happened to me. Uh, yeah, I betrayed myself. And then when you have to deal with the consequences of that, it can be too much to bear when you care so much about yourself and the other person.
Wait,
But
have
yeah,
you betrayed the one you love, or the one you love betrayed you, and that made you feel?
I betrayed myself and my partner
Okay.
after having been betrayed myself. I have this rap song which I can't believe I'm referring to because it's not a rap song, and I'm not a rapper, but part of the journey and the
I've seen you
process
play
of,
piano and sing.
yeah, the piano's right there. My dad had he's like plotting ways to like get rid of it. Um,
Tell us about the
yeah,
rap song.
well, I was just thinking there's this line that's like, um, they say hurt people. I say hurt people's love's lethal. And when you skirt fetal, and when you skirt evil, you go back to fetal. Feel your soul cry like your adrenal glands on diesel. And that line is actually about that incident I was referring to, where, and then there's lines around it where it's like my lover, it just describes an incident that was very traumatic, which was what I was referring to when I realized like I need to heal my inner child, or he might die. I don't want him to die. I don't want him to die.
Yeah, we don't
I
want the
want
inner
him
child to
to.
die.
No. Oh my God, if he
And
dies,
it's
what's the point?
possible.
I think that what I was telling you earlier about the conversation I was having with my friend here about why do we love being around kids so much? Like why when we're allowed, why am I when I'm around kids I lose sense of time myself. It happens to me in the field. I'll be in Mongolia, I'll be in Puerto Rico, there'll be a hurricane, there'll be a this, there'll be a that as a reporter in the field, and then you naturally come across kids, and then kids like poke at you, they share things, they always want to interact. In Mongolia, we went to some hut, they're like offering me milk, pulling on me, trying to throw their soccer ball at me. And my poor producer, like my producer, our team, the whole team was like getting distracted by the kids, but I was the one who needed to conduct the interview. And the point is, there's like 40 minutes of footage of me playing in the middle of this huge pasture with children, and like I end up like almost like running one of the kids over, and like
It's a
we're like,
reminder of stillness of life and happiness
I,
of life and simplicity.
I lost myself in that moment. I lost myself in the Syrian and Lebanese refugee camps and the border there. Oh my God, this is the perfect answer. You're really good at this. This is the perfect answer to your original question. It just took this long because I'm really
I
bad at
told
it.
you we will get there, and
Yeah,
it might
you're
take
right.
an hour and
So,
a half.
oh, I'm getting emotional. Um, I'm really getting emotional because I'm having a realization, not so sudden, but in the Philippines, when I did a story about children who are being abused by their parents, in Puerto Rico in the hurricane, in all the stories I've done, there is kind of a common thread and why, where when I'm around children, I lose myself in that sense of wonder and that, the quickness with which children are willing to forgive, and the kind of resilient nature of children. Like when that kid fell down, like in Mongolia, honestly, there's footage of this somewhere, but like, I ran, and like literally, the kid ran into me, beelined, and hit the floor. Like, and I was like, and he bounced up, and my instinct was that I had met the kid 20 minutes earlier. I just picked the kid up, put him on my shoulder, like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And that connection that I had in that moment with that kid, reassuring him he was going to be okay, but also reassuring myself, like, oh my God, is insurance going to pay for this? Like, Um,
Yeah.
and those moments around children when I'm in the field, they're so um, priceless, and they really inform the way in which all those stories would would turn out if it was completely up to me. But like making them for big media companies, and also part of what prompted my recognition that I need to heal my inner child. Like, why is it when I'm around children do I drop everything, literally drop my job and play with the kids? Like, I need to do some healing myself of my inner child. So, yeah, well done. I'm very
Wow.
impressed.
Thank you.
Not with myself, with your ability to unearth that, because I didn't
And
know that
with
was true.
I'm glad it's unearthing here on Exhale.
Me too. My purpose is consistently shifting. So it's not static, but I know that at its core, I've realized recently that it's about shifting my own perceptions and my own preconceived notions and my own my own perceptions about my reality and about reality and other people's realities, in order to better be able to then shift other people's perceptions, and particularly away from like um, frameworks and mindsets like us versus them, or that rely on othering, or that rely on like highlighting divisions or what makes us different rather than what we all share in common. And it sounds like uber noble, but it's really just a product of, I don't know, I mean, I am named after a prophet, but I'm not trying to have some sort of prophetic mission, like I say
Nothing's
that.
wrong with uber noble
No,
though.
amen, that's what I'm learning. It's okay to be cheesy and noble and have morals.
Be cheesy,
uh
be extra noble, extra kind, extra whatever it
no,
is.
yeah, yeah, respect to you for saying that, because yeah, there's like a weird stigma around that, at least for certain people and
There's
circles and
stigma
men.
around crying, around being kind,
Yeah,
about vulnerability, about mental health. There's
yeah.
basically stigma around everything that's good for you.
I'll say something that I didn't plan or expect to say, but just popped in my head around stigma. um I think a lot of men struggle with intimacy. And it's not just men who struggle with physical intimacy with other women, it's men who struggle with intimacy in general. There are a lot of men who don't struggle, but I know in my experience, there are many more who do. And I think it's back to what you were saying. And I think it's important to mention this because, like, as a child, I didn't struggle with, like, it felt natural to hug my friend when he fell. It felt natural, whether it was a boy or a girl, it felt natural to do that. Like, when you see kids being cute and cheesy, we all like say, oh, because it like appeals to our instinct, right? It's instinctive to care. And for whatever reason, life gets in the way, society, culture, tradition, the way we're conditioned. And then it's like you get to a point in life where you're like, inside, I feel like doing this, but I can't do it for this and this reason. So yeah, I think it's really important that we be aware of like be connected to our intuition, both
Yeah.
emotionally. Yeah,
And to live it as
emotionally.
loud as you can. And
Yeah,
hopefully it can ripple effect into others and understand that it's completely normal.
yeah. What is
Yeah.
normal? Nothing is normal. But yes, I know exactly what you
I mean, whatever normal is to society,
mean.
really.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times, I have two more questions, and then I want to move to questions from Isra, and then we can wrap it up.
Cool.
But before I ask you these two questions, I
Mm.
realized every time you're answering,
You
there's a
look up
lot
and
of
think.
no, that's amazing. There's a lot of care into, oh, what someone's gonna think, oh, what this is gonna think, and it's actually part of my question journey.
Yeah.
Um, what do you do, or how do you deal with thinking about others? What do they think of you? Oh my, like what is Ahmed going through, etc., etc. And how do you deal with negative comments, especially that you're a journalist at AJ Plus? So,
Yeah.
how do you deal with negative comments, and how do you try to deal with those constant thoughts of caring about what people think of you?
I think it all ties back to consistently working and trying to detach myself from my attachment to myself, to all the variations of myself. Ahmed the journalist, Ahmed the first son or only son, Ahmed the Palestinian, Ahmed, the sensitive guy, Ahmed. There's so many. Um, it's like when you start to really question and take a moment to look at yourself, and I find that often the things that bother me about other people are things that bother me about myself. I find often that so much of my self-judgment comes from how I perceive others to judge me, whether they're really judging me or not. And so I guess for me, the journey to care less, I mean, I think once you have conviction and a sense of self-worth, it's like it's symbiotic to how much you have of that is how much you're going to care what people think. And the way you get that is like, everyone just having understanding that there's different truths. I think as a journalist, I've been really fortunate to be exposed to so many different people and people in different political realities, social realities, people who have conflicting identities, and just seeing all that and seeing that as normal, as something that's consistent in my life, going from this place to that place. It's really made me feel like I'm always an outsider. It's really made me see how much I can relate to virtually anyone, even if they're rich or poor or black or religious or not, or this or, completely different background, completely different culture. There are points that we can connect to. And I think through that, like seeing someone who I otherwise might think is making a lot of poor decisions and hurting the world and hurting other people, but still being able to relate to them, somehow gives me an ability to not care so much what people think. The times that I care the most is when I fear or when I feel or I notice that the people who I love, I'm hurting in one way or another, or I'm causing them anxiety, and that's where I think, unfortunately, a lot of us allow that fear to paralyze us and not let us speak louder and not be who we really want to be. And there's so many limitations and concerns that are really practical and pragmatic and can have real life consequences. And I say this with so much privilege. One of the things that I've realized in this coronavirus time is just how much privilege I have. And, you know, for a lot of my life, I focused on how I was part of different marginalized groups, which is true. And it was because I was made to be aware of those things, like based on where I was living and how people treated me and how I internalized the way that they treated me based on my name or my appearance or my religion or the way I acted. I'm too feminine. I'm too this. So yeah, I think, I don't know. That's a bit general, but that's how I do
Okay, fair enough.
it.
What are you celebrating?
I am celebrating the moment more than I ever have. I mean, really. And I'm learning to celebrate bad moments, which is like, how did I not know that through celebrating bad moments, you would be able to withstand them better? Someone should have told you that when you go through puberty. Um,
When you
no,
go through
but
puberty.
like, I don't know, at some age, you should just be told
There's a
that,
lot of things we should have been told, to be
you know
honest.
what? I mean, my
Many
mom told
things.
me, but I was just like, she also told me a lot of things that, like, anywho, the point is, no, I mean, it's funny. You think back to, it's cheesy, but like, my mom used to say certain things like, "Mama, you are irresponsible." All these things she would say to me growing up, and I'd be like, and she'd, little things like appreciate the moment, da, 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 and I never did it. And now I'm like, how many years later, learning it all over again.
We never take it seriously because the way it's sent to us is
Yeah,
with
yeah,
that
confusing.
finger and like
Yeah, control.
with so
I
much.
also
Yeah.
I also struggled with, I told you earlier, I used to confuse love with attention. Maybe as problematically, I also didn't know that, like, what is love without control? And on a serious note, I think that that's something that in a lot of communities, that's بالذات بالعالم العربي, in the Arab world, in the Muslim
Traditional
world,
thing in the Arab world, 100%.
100%. And I was aware of it, but I wasn't fully aware of how it changed how I feel about love. And so many of us are unable to accept love. And
Because it goes back to you thinking you're unworthy of it. Just
amen.
like you're
And I
unworthy of success.
exactly, it's all comes down to a root of not being able to accept love, or even when it comes, even when your love is expressed towards you. Maybe, we have five love languages or whatever. So much of the last few years for me has been learning how to accept love from others, but also from myself. And yeah, I'm. So, what was the question? What are you celebrating? I'm celebrating
You're celebrating the moment.
my growing, yeah, and my growing ability to accept love. I'll tell you, being in Kuwait has also been like a little bit of a master class of learning to accept love all over again, and in a context that's frighteningly familiar, but
From
also super.
family.
Yeah, from family and from, I would say, from people who are serving as mirrors of myself, just to keep it vague and a bit
Yeah,
mysterious.
that's that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, Ahmed, how do you wish to be remembered?
Oof. Hardest question last. She is really on it, this one. Uh, remembered. You said I could take time.
All the
Uh,
time you need.
how do I want to be remembered? An inauthentic answer would be, I don't really care to be remembered. I just want to have had impact in this world. Um, and I do want to have impact in this world. But I also think we all have egos and we want to be remembered. And I think the way I want to be remembered is fondly, like tenderly, like that I made people feel things, that I made people feel bad things maybe sometimes, like when I do documentaries, like what is the impact I hope to have? If people feel negative emotions, but that can somehow motivate them to change or shift or whatever, then I hope they remember that. Um, and then the other way, I guess, about feelings, like I just want to be remembered as someone who made people question things and to feel things.
Having an
How do you want
impact
to be
on
remembered?
people. How do I want to be remembered? That's
Yeah.
the journalist in you mirroring the questions.
Yeah. I'm like, why am I asking answering the question? Yeah.
How do I want to
No,
be
but yeah, what's
remembered?
important to you about the way you are remembered? There's my edit.
I want to be remembered in a way that I was able to unearth, like you said today, things inside yourself. So maybe I won't be remembered on a big scale, but maybe I will be remembered from person to person, where
Yeah.
my conversations with you actually impacted you to unearth a few things inside of you that you did not know or were looping on, and finally were able to reach peace with it, or clarity, if not peace. I want to be remembered in those ways. That's on a small scale and personal scale.
Well, it's funny. I should stop saying that because it's never funny when I say it. You know what's interesting? I do want to say it. You said to me about why we're doing this or why you're doing louder after exhale. You said that you use your anxiety. You said I use my anxiety and my pain, and I try to use it for the better. I started louder as soon as I started exhale. We can interview people who have the highest ranking in the world, the most following, and also just someone who's just starting out, and both will answer equivalent to the same deep question that will show you the unity of humanity. The questions are deep. You said they were personal, so I've been warned. And you also said that I could take my time to answer them. And when you were saying all that, I stopped and thought to myself, as someone who spent like the last more than 10 years, um, asking questions for a living and doing interviews, I was like, wow, like, how did I never set up an interview like this? Because you made me feel like I often say, and I just felt a connection with you in that moment because I often start like I'll be like interviewing the president of Pakistan or whatever, and right before I'll be like, so I tend to go a little bit deep, and I like to get personal. But don't worry, we have all the time in the world. When in reality, the president of Pakistan doesn't have all the time in the world. Doesn't want me to go deep, and definitely doesn't think he's there to answer personal questions. But now maybe I should just have a different kind of show. Maybe that's
I
part of
hope
the
it
purpose.
inspires you to do that.
You do inspire me. That's why I wanted to read that with people because I think it's cool when young people just do things authentically because they find their flow, and then here we are.
I'm
So
really glad we found our flow with you, Ahmad, really, and it is an honor to have you here. And thank you for being authentic and loud with your truth with us. And hopefully, we'll have another one soon where we can get even louder.
it's been a privilege. And by the way, uh, uh, you in this interview made me feel like I should be louder. So maybe not this week or next month, but here's to getting louder. Thank you.
Yes, here's to getting louder.